6 months after becoming an internet legend, Ashanti Davis thought she'd found balance between two worlds. She was wrong. When a routine protection assignment turns into a trap designed specifically for her, Ashanti discovers that viral fame has a price, and the Bake family has been watching, studying, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But this time they're not after Lee Ji-hoon. They're after something far more valuable, the one thing Ashanti never expected to have again, a family. What happens when the woman who defeated 100 assassins with a hairpin faces an enemy that can't be stopped with violence? When protecting what she loves means sacrificing everything she's become? Stay until the end, because this isn't just about survival anymore. It's about discovering what happens when a legend realizes she's still human. Before we begin, like this video if you believe strength isn't just about fighting, it's about knowing when to stand down. Subscribe to Love and Tension because part 2 will break your heart before it puts it back together. The morning sun cut through Chicago's skyline like a promise that hadn't been kept yet, painting Ashanti Davis's reinforced apartment windows in shades of amber and gold that almost made the bulletproof glass look beautiful. She stood at those windows, 3 floors up, cameras everywhere, panic button within arm's reach, drinking coffee from a mug that read "World's Okayest Cultural Liaison" that Keisha had given her as a joke that wasn't entirely a joke. 6 months. Half a year since that February night when 30 assassins walked into Constellation and only one person walked out standing. Half a year since her life split cleanly into before and after, like a bone that healed crooked but still functioned. The video had hit 47 million views now, spawned countless reaction videos and frame-by-frame analysis, and conspiracy theories about whether it was real or elaborate CGI. Ashanti had watched them all, amused and disturbed in equal measure, seeing herself transformed into something mythical by people who would never know her name. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, the secured one Lee's tech team had given her, encrypted 6 ways from Sunday, untraceable even if someone managed to physically steal it. She picked it up, already knowing who it would be. Lee Ji-hoon. Morning briefing at 9. Taeyong will collect you at 8:30. Dress code, business casual. We're meeting with the legitimate side today. Ashanti. Define legitimate in your world. Lee. People who file taxes and don't carry guns to contract negotiations. Ashanti. So boring legitimate. Got it. She smiled beside herself, set down the phone, and headed to her closet, which had expanded considerably since joining the Hyundai network. Lee had insisted she needed professional attire for her cultural liaison role, and somewhere between his insistence and her reluctant acceptance, she'd accumulated enough business wear to outfit a small corporate office. Today she chose gray slacks, a burgundy blouse, and a blazer that hid the small tactical knife strapped to her lower back. Old habits from her grandmother's training, new tools from Lee's resources. The hairpin, her grandmother's sterling silver hairpin, now legendary in certain circles, secured her bun with the same familiar weight it had carried for years. 5 inches of innocuous metal that ended 30 lives and started a revolution she hadn't meant to lead. Ashanti touched it briefly, a reflex that had become ritual, and wondered what her grandmother would think of all this. You're a Davis, baby girl. We survive. Yeah, they survived. The question was what came after survival, when staying alive stopped being the achievement and started being the baseline expectation. At 8:27 a.m., her phone chimed with Taeyong's arrival notification. Ashanti grabbed her bag. Leather, expensive, another gift from Lee that she'd initially refused before accepting, and headed downstairs, nodding to Mrs. Chen on the 2nd floor, who still thought Ashanti just had a very attentive boyfriend who'd installed all that security equipment. The black SUV idled at the curb, Taeyong behind the wheel looking like he always did, early 40s, built like someone who'd spent serious time in a gym and a war zone, wearing sunglasses even though Chicago's October morning was overcast and gray. He'd been her primary driver and shadow for 6 months now, never intrusive but always present, like a well-trained dog who happened to be highly skilled in 7 forms of combat. "Morning, Ashanti," he said as she climbed into the back seat. She'd given up insisting she could sit in front after he'd explained it was protocol, and she was tired of arguing. "Sleep well?" "Well enough. You?" "3 hours. Twins are teethin'." He pulled into traffic with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done protective driving in actual war zones. "Ji-hoon mentioned you might need coffee before the meeting. There's a thermos in the console." Ashanti grabbed it gratefully, recognizing the setup immediately, her exact order from the cafe 3 blocks from her apartment, prepared before she even woke up, because Lee's people were nothing if not thorough. "Is this creepy or considerate? I genuinely can't tell anymore." "Both, probably," Taeyang smiled in the rearview mirror. "That's the job." The Hyundai Network's Chicago headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a building in the West Loop that technically housed a legitimate import-export company dealing in Korean electronics and textiles, which was true as far as it went. The legitimate business turned real profit, employed real people, and filed real taxes. It just also happened to serve as the operational front for Lee's less legal enterprises, providing infrastructure and cover for the shadow empire that operated beneath. Ashanti had learned to navigate both worlds, the bright office spaces where contracts got signed and quarterly reports got filed, and the darker back rooms where different kinds of negotiations happened. Her role as cultural liaison existed genuinely. She helped Korean businesses understand American regulations, translated not just language but cultural context, smoothed over misunderstandings that could derail deals worth millions. Lee hadn't lied when he'd offered her real work. He just hadn't mentioned how often that real work would brush up against the criminal enterprise funding it. The morning briefing took place in Conference Room 3B, which had windows overlooking the Chicago River and enough technology embedded in the walls to detect surveillance equipment from 3 blocks away. Lee sat at the head of the table, flanked by his inner circle, Minjin, his chief financial officer, who looked like an accountant and thought like a strategist, Haewon, his head of security, who'd initially been skeptical of Ashanti's skills until watching her dismantle 3 attackers during a shipping yard ambush in July, and Jiwoo, his legal counsel who specialized in making criminal enterprises look legitimate on paper. "Good morning, Ashanti." Lee gestured to the chair at his right hand, a position that raised eyebrows initially, but nobody questioned anymore after 6 months of watching her prove her value. "Coffee? Already caffeinated, thanks." She sat, noting the documents spread across the table, contracts, shipping manifests, what looked like architectural blueprints. "What's the occasion?" "Expansion." Lee pulled up a presentation on the wall-mounted screen, showing a warehouse complex near the Port of Chicago. "We're acquiring legitimate warehouse space to streamline our electronics import business. Above board, fully legal, significant investment in Chicago's economy. Also happens to provide excellent infrastructure for our less documented operations. 2 birds, 1 warehouse." Ashanti studied the blueprints, her mind automatically calculating sight lines and vulnerabilities and escape routes, occupational hazard of surviving assassination attempts. "What's my role?" "The sellers are Korean-American, 2nd generation, very protective of their father's legacy business. They want assurances that we'll honor the history of the space, maintain some of the original workforce, treat it as more than just another acquisition." Lee met her eyes. "They specifically requested to meet our cultural liaison. They've heard about you." "Heard what, exactly?" "That you're authentic, not corporate polish pretending to care about community. They respect that." He paused. "They also heard about the video, the hairpin warrior." Ashanti felt her jaw tighten. The video was both blessing and curse. It had given her a reputation that opened doors and also painted a target on her back that never quite faded. "They know it's me?" "They suspect, nothing confirmed, but your reputation in our community has grown considerably." Lee's expression was carefully neutral. "Some people see you as a legend, others see you as a threat. The sellers see you as someone who understands what it means to fight for something worth protecting." "Poetic." Ashanti tapped the blueprints. "When's the meeting?" "This afternoon, 2 p.m., at the warehouse itself. They want you to see it, feel it, understand what they're trusting us with." Lee leaned forward slightly. Ashanti, this is important. This acquisition gives us legitimate expansion and operational cover we badly need. The Begg family has been quiet, but that silence won't last forever. When they move again, having this infrastructure in place could mean the difference between containment and catastrophe. There it was, the constant tension underlying everything. The Beck family hadn't retaliated after Lee's declaration 6 months ago, hadn't sent more assassins or attempted direct confrontation, but everyone knew it was temporary, a Cold War waiting to go hot again. The question was when, not if. "I'll make it work," Ashanti said simply. "What do you need from me? Be yourself. Tell them why this matters to you. Make them believe we'll honor their legacy." Lee's voice dropped slightly. "And if anything feels wrong during the meeting, trust that instinct. The Becks have been too quiet for too long." The morning dissolved into logistics and preparation, reviewing the warehouse history, meeting the seller's representatives, understanding the emotional weight this property carries for a family who'd built it from nothing in the 1970s. Ashanti found herself genuinely invested, recognizing echoes of her own grandmother's journey in their story. Immigrants who'd fought for every inch of success, who'd built something real in a country that hadn't always welcomed them. By the time Taeyong drove her toward the warehouse district at 1:30 p.m., Ashanti had her pitch ready. Not corporate platitudes, but honest recognition of what this place represented and why preserving that mattered. Lee rode with them this time, unusual but not unprecedented for high-stakes meetings. "Nervous?" he asked as they crossed into the industrial area near the port. "Should I be?" "No, you're good at this, better than you think." He glanced at her. "You've become essential to our operations, Ashanti, not just for your fighting skills, though those remain remarkable, but for this, bridge building, understanding what people need to hear to trust us. That's rarer than combat ability. Is this you being sentimental or strategic?" "Both. I'm multifaceted." He smiled slightly. "Just wanted you to know. You've exceeded every expectation I had 6 months ago." Ashanti didn't know how to respond to that. Genuine appreciation from a man who commanded a criminal empire felt complicated, so she just nodded and watched the warehouse district approach through tinted windows. The warehouse itself was exactly what she'd expected, and somehow more. A massive structure of brick and steel that had weathered 50 years of Chicago seasons, worn but sturdy, carrying history in every weathered surface. The sellers were already there, 3 generations of the Park family standing in front of the main entrance like guardians of something sacred. Mr. Park Sr. was 78, walking with a cane but standing straight-backed with dignity that age couldn't diminish. His son, David Park, was early 50s, wearing a business suit but with his father's same proud bearing. And David's daughter, Michelle, was late 20s, sharp-eyed and skeptical in the way of people who'd learned not to trust easily. "Mr. Lee." David Park stepped forward, shaking Lee's hand with professional courtesy that didn't quite reach warmth. "Thank you for coming personally. Thank you for considering our offer." Lee gestured to Ashanti. "This is Ashanti Davis, our cultural liaison. She'll be directly involved in the transition if we reach agreement." Michelle Park's gaze fixed on Ashanti with unsettling intensity. "You're the one from the video, the hairpin warrior." No point denying it. Ashanti had learned that half-truths worked better than full lies. "That was me, though I prefer to be known for my actual work rather than one night's chaos. That chaos saved lives." Mr. Park Sr. spoke for the first time, his English heavily accented but clear. "My son showed me the video. 30 men with guns, 1 woman with grandmother's pin. That is courage, Miss Davis. That is knowing what matters. It was survival, Mr. Park. Sometimes courage and desperation look similar from the outside." "Yes," the old man nodded slowly. "Yes, they do. Come, I show you what we built, what we trust you to keep." The tour took an hour, walking through warehouse spaces that told stories in their scuffed floors and reinforced walls. Mr. Park Sr. spoke with pride and sadness, explaining how they'd started with nothing, how this building represented everything his generation had sacrificed to give the next generation opportunities. David added practical details, current operations, employee considerations, structural concerns that needed addressing. Michelle asked pointed questions about about their intentions, clearly the family's designated skeptic. Ashanti listened more than she spoke, taking notes mentally and emotionally, understanding that this wasn't really about warehouse space or business acquisitions. This was about legacy, about the weight of building something meaningful and the terror of watching it pass into other hands. When they reached the main floor, a vast open space that currently housed pallets of electronics and textile equipment, Mr. Park Sr. stopped, leaning on his cane, and looked at Ashanti directly. "You understand," he said simply. "Not just business understanding, real understanding. I see it in your eyes. You have lost something important, yes? Something you wish to honor?" Ashanti thought of her grandmother, of dementia stealing memories before death stole everything else, of inheriting a hairpin and skills that had reshaped her entire life. "Yes, I understand. Then I trust you." He looked at Lee. "Your money is good. Your reputation is complicated but honest. But Miss Davis, she has grandmother's spirit. She will keep this place what it should be. We accept your offer." David and Michelle looked surprised. Clearly they'd expected more negotiation, more hesitation, but they didn't contradict their patriarch. Lee stepped forward to shake hands, beginning the formal process of sealing the deal, and Ashanti felt something warm and uncomfortable in her chest that might have been pride or responsibility or both. They were finalizing details, discussing timelines and transition processes, when Ashanti's instincts screamed danger. Nothing obvious, no sounds, no visible threats. Just a wrongness in the air, a subtle shift that her grandmother's training had taught her to recognize. She glanced around the warehouse floor, scanning for threats, and found them. Men, 20 of them, emerging from behind pallets and equipment where they'd been hiding, armed, moving with coordinated precision toward the group, and not rushing, walking with purpose but not urgency, like they knew their targets weren't going anywhere. "Lee," Ashanti said quietly, her hand already moving toward her hairpin. "We have company." Everyone turned. The Parks froze. Lee's expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Tae-young, who'd been standing near the entrance, was already moving toward them, weapon drawn. The attackers spread out in a loose semicircle, cutting off exits, and from their center stepped a woman Ashanti had never seen before. Late 40s, dressed in expensive business wear, carrying herself with authority that didn't need weapons to be threatening. Lee Ji-hoon. Her English was perfect, unaccented, American-raised. "How convenient to find you here, with your pet assassin and witnesses." She smiled at the Parks. "You really should have accepted our offer last month. This would have been much simpler." "Bak Soon-hee," Lee said, recognition and resignation mixing in his voice. "This is beneath you. Attacking a business meeting? Threatening civilians?" "Civilians?" Bak Soon-hee laughed. "These civilians are selling to you instead of us. That makes them combatants. And as for your pet dog," she looked at Ashanti, "she's been combat since the moment she killed 30 of our people." Ashanti's mind raced through calculations. 20 attackers, professional but not the elite squad from 6 months ago. Tae-young was skilled but outnumbered. Lee carried a weapon but wasn't primarily a fighter. The Parks were non-combatants who'd be liabilities in a firefight. And Bak Soon-hee hadn't drawn a weapon, which meant she didn't plan to do her own killing. "What do you want?" Ashanti kept her voice level, buying time to assess vulnerabilities and angles. "Initially, this warehouse. Now?" Soon-hee's smile widened. "Everything. The warehouse, Lee's operations, his territory, his assets. And as a bonus, I want the legendary hairpin warrior to understand that legends die like everyone else, just with better stories afterward." The attack came fast. Soon-hee gave a subtle hand signal, and her people rushed forward in coordinated formation. Ashanti's hairpin was already in her hand, her body moving before conscious thought, placing herself between the Parks and the attackers. But something was wrong. The attackers weren't using lethal force. They had weapons but weren't shooting, were using batons and tactical approaches designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Ashanti registered this in the half-second before the first attacker reached her, adjusted her response accordingly, and took him down with a strike to the knee and throat that left him gasping, but alive. The second attacker fell to her hairpin through his shoulder, painful, disabling, but not fatal. The third went down when she swept his legs and dislocated his elbow with precise force. But they kept coming, waves of trained fighters who knew how to coordinate, who'd studied her video and anticipated her patterns. Tae-young was engaged with 4 attackers near the entrance, holding his own but unable to reach Ashanti. Lee had pulled the Parks behind a forklift, providing cover, weapon drawn but not firing, probably calculating the same thing Ashanti had noticed. This wasn't a killing assault, it was capture. The realization hit her the same moment the net did. Literal net, tactical restraint netting that 4 attackers threw from different angles, weighted corners connecting to create a web that tangled her legs and arms, even as she tried to cut through it with her hairpin. Ashanti went down hard, still fighting, managing to disable 2 more attackers even while restrained, but the net was designed specifically to counter her fighting style. They'd studied the video, learned, adapted. More attackers piled on, overwhelming through numbers and specialized equipment. Ashanti felt her hairpin torn from her grip, the first time she'd been disarmed in 6 months, and then hands pinning her wrists, zip ties biting into skin, the net being secured around her like a cocoon. "Stop fighting." Bak Soon-hee's voice came from above her, "unless you want the Parks to suffer for your resistance." Ashanti meant still. Through the netting, she saw 3 attackers had surrounded the Park's hiding spot, weapons trained on the terrified family. Lee was also restrained now, Tae-young unconscious near the entrance, blood on his temple. Good. Soon-hee crouched beside Ashanti, studying her like an interesting specimen. The legendary warrior, defeated by basic tactics and overwhelming numbers. Should I be disappointed or vindicated? "What do you want?" Ashanti repeated through gritted teeth. "I told you, everything." Soon-hee stood, starting with you understanding that your interference 6 months ago had consequences. "You embarrassed my family. Cost us 30 trained operatives, made us look weak in front of every criminal organization from here to Seoul." She gestured, and 2 attackers hauled Ashanti to her feet, still wrapped in netting. "So I studied you, learned your patterns, discovered your weaknesses, and planned this very carefully. This is a business meeting," Lee called from his restraints. "Attacking now achieves nothing but escalation. It achieves my objective," Sun-hee corrected. "I wanted you to watch me break your favorite weapon, and I wanted those considering selling to you," she looked at the terrified Parks, "to understand the cost of choosing wrong." "Leave them out of this," Ashanti said. "Your quarrel is with Lee and me, not civilians. Everyone is a combatant when they choose sides." Sun-hee checked her watch. "My people will be here in 10 minutes to transport everyone. The Parks get released unharmed if they agree to sell to us instead. Lee gets negotiated for because he's worth more alive than dead. Tae-yang there will recover eventually, and you," she smiled at Ashanti, "you get to discover what happens to legends who forget they're mortal." The 10 minutes stretched like hours. Ashanti tested her restraints constantly, looking for weaknesses, but whoever had designed this capture had known exactly what they were doing. The netting was reinforced tactical grade, the zip ties were military specification, and the 4 guards surrounding her stayed just outside striking distance. Sun-hee spent the time on her phone, making calls in Korean that Ashanti couldn't fully follow but understood the gist, arranging transport, coordinating with other elements of the Bayak organization, consolidating a victory she'd clearly planned for months. Mr. Park Sr. kept trying to speak, to negotiate, but his son and granddaughter kept him quiet, understanding that words wouldn't help right now. Lee caught Ashanti's eyes across the warehouse floor, and in his gaze she saw apology and calculation. He was planning something, waiting for an opening that might not come. The transport vehicles arrived exactly when promised. 3 black vans, professional and anonymous, pulling into the warehouse through the main delivery entrance. More Bayek operatives emerged, twice as many as the original 20, and Ashanti's hope of fighting free evaporated. You could only defeat so many enemies, even with supernatural skill. Eventually, numbers mattered. They separated everyone. Parks to one van with guards and instructions about their cooperation, Lee to another with additional restraints, Tai Yang being carried unconscious to a third. Ashanti got loaded into the first van with Lee, secured to an internal mounting point that prevented any movement beyond breathing. "I'm sorry," Lee said as the van pulled out, heading somewhere Ashanti couldn't see. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated—" "Shut up." Ashanti kept her voice low, aware of the driver and guard in the front seats. "Strategic apologies help nothing. What's the play? Depends on where they take us. If it's a Bayek facility, my people will triangulate using your tracker and—" He stopped. "You have the tracker, correct? The one embedded in your shoe?" Ashanti's stomach dropped. She was wearing different shoes today, business-appropriate flats instead of her usual modified sneakers with the tracking chip Lee's tech team had installed. Vanity and professionalism had made her swap them out this morning, never imagining she'd need technical backup. "No," she admitted. "Wrong shoes." Lee's expression didn't change, but she saw the hope die behind his eyes. "Then we're on our own until my people trace us through other means, which could take hours or days or never," Ashanti finished. "Understood." The drive lasted 47 minutes by Ashanti's internal count, heading generally north and then west based on turns and traffic patterns. They ended somewhere that felt industrial. She heard sounds of machinery and shipping equipment when the van doors opened, and got transferred to what appeared to be a renovated warehouse space that the Bayek family was using as a temporary operations center. They separated her from Lee immediately. Different rooms, different guards. Ashanti got secured to a chair in what probably had been an office once, her restraints checked and double-checked before the guards left her alone with Bayek Sun-hee. "Comfortable?" Sun-hee pulled up a second chair, sitting across from Ashanti like they were about to have tea instead of whatever this actually was. "I want you to understand something before we proceed. This isn't revenge. I'm not torturing you for killing our people, though I certainly could. This is strategic." "Strategic how?" "Keep her talking. Learn what you can." Ashanti's grandmother's voice echoed the lessons. "You're a symbol now. The video made you larger than life, a black woman defeating impossible odds, protecting others, becoming a legend. People see that and believe they can fight back. Women especially. Do you know how many self-defense classes have sprouted up in the past 6 months using your name? How many people you've inspired?" Sun-hee leaned forward. "That's dangerous. Not to me personally, I don't care about viral videos, but to the system that keeps organizations like mine functioning. We rely on people feeling helpless, accepting that we're untouchable. You disrupted that. So this is about controlling narrative? This is about reminding everyone that legends are made of flesh and blood breaks." Soon he stood, walked to a table Ashanti hadn't noticed, and picked up something familiar, her grandmother's hairpin, the sterling silver gleaming under fluorescent lights. "Do you know what I'm going to do?" Soon he held the pin delicately, almost reverently. "I'm going to destroy this, melt it down, post video evidence of its destruction, show everyone that the legendary weapon is just metal, that the legendary warrior is just a woman, and that fighting back accomplishes nothing except drawing attention that gets you destroyed more thoroughly." Rage burned through Ashanti's chest, not at the threat to her, but at the idea of destroying her grandmother's legacy, the last physical piece of the woman who'd raised her and trained her and prepared her for impossible survival. But she kept her face neutral, her voice steady. "And then what? You kill me on camera too? Make an example?" "God, no. I'm not a monster." Soon-Hee set the pin down. "I'm going to release you, let you go back to your life, but you'll go back broken. Not physically, but symbolically. The warrior without her weapon, the legend that lost. And every time someone sees you, they'll remember that fighting back led to public humiliation and loss. That'll be more effective than any killing. You think destroying a hairpin breaks me?" Ashanti kept her voice level. "I'm more than one piece of metal. We'll see." Soon-Hee checked her watch. "I have other business to attend to. Negotiations with Lee, arrangements for the parks, consolidating our newly acquired territories. I'll be back in a few hours to live stream the pin's destruction. I suggest you spend that time contemplating how legends die. Not with explosions and drama, but with whimpers and obsolescence." She left, locking the door behind her, leaving Ashanti alone with her restraints and her thoughts, and the hairpin sitting 20 feet away on a table she couldn't reach. The hours dragged like wounded animals. Ashanti tested her restraints obsessively. The chair was bolted to the floor. The zip ties were professional grade that wouldn't snap even with extreme force, and the room had no tools or sharp edges within reach. She was secured perfectly, designed by someone who understood exactly how dangerous she was and had compensated accordingly. Through the walls, she heard muffled conversations in Korean, occasional bursts of laughter from the guards, the sounds of an organization conducting business with the confidence of people who believed they'd won. And maybe they had. Maybe Soon-Hee was right. Sometimes legends didn't die with drama, they just became irrelevant. Ashanti thought about her grandmother, about the woman who'd taught her survival through games that weren't games, who'd carried skills and scars from a past she never fully explained. Had she felt like this once? Captured, restrained, watching her tools and symbols get prepared for destruction? Or had she been smarter, better, more careful than her granddaughter? "You're a Davis, baby girl. We survive." But surviving wasn't winning, and Ashanti was starting to understand the difference. Time passed in unmarked stretches until the door opened again, and Soon-Hee returned, carrying a setup that made Ashanti's stomach clench. Smartphone on a tripod, portable smelting equipment, theatrical lighting. She was actually going to do this, live-streamed the destruction like a performance. 20,000 people watching already. Soon-Hee said cheerfully, adjusting the camera angle. "I posted teasers on the forums where your video went viral. Watch the legendary hairpin's final moment kind of thing. People are fascinated." She moved the hairpin into frame, positioning it carefully. "Any last words for your audience?" Ashanti met the camera lens, thinking about those 20,000 people. Probably more women than men, probably people who'd been inspired by her accidental legend, who'd signed up for self-defense classes or stood up to someone threatening them, or just felt a little braver because a black waitress had defeated impossible odds. "Yeah, I have words." Want to know what Ashanti said to those 20,000 people watching her legend get destroyed? Comment below. What would you say if you were in her position? Your answer might surprise you about your own strength. Act 2. The breaking. Soon-Hee raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting Ashanti to actually engage. "By all means, inspire them one last time before I prove inspiration is just fantasy." Ashanti looked directly into the camera, at those 20,000 people watching, and spoke with the same steady voice she'd used serving water at Constellation 6 months ago, before viral fame, before criminal enterprises, before becoming someone larger than life. 6 months ago, I was a waitress. Broke, tired, invisible. Then one night, I did something impossible because I had no choice, and a camera caught it, and suddenly, I was a symbol. She paused, letting that sink in. But here's what that video didn't show. It didn't show the next morning when I could barely walk. It didn't show the nightmares. It didn't show me sitting in my apartment wondering if I'd become something I didn't want to be. It didn't show the part where being a legend is exhausting. Soon-Hee looked confused, like this wasn't the defiant speech she'd expected. Good. Confusion created opportunities. And now you're watching someone destroy the symbol, this hairpin that became legendary. And you're probably thinking that means the legend ends too, that I'm broken, that fighting back was pointless. Ashanti leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. But the hairpin was never the point. The video was never the point. The legend was never the point. She held Sun Hee's gaze now, ignoring the camera. The point is that ordinary people, broken, tired, invisible, ordinary people have more strength than anyone expects, including themselves. You can destroy this pin. You can humiliate me. You can prove that legends are mortal. But you can't destroy what that video actually meant to the people who saw it. And what did it mean? Sun Hee asked, her hand hovering over the smelting equipment's power switch. That we don't have to accept powerlessness, that fighting back is possible, that one person who refuses to quit can change everything. Ashanti smiled without humor. So go ahead, melt the pin, make your point, but you're not destroying a legend. You're just making a better story for people to remember why they shouldn't give up. For a long moment, Sun Hee just stared. Then she laughed, genuinely laughed, and shook her head. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Both, probably. I'm multifaceted. Sun Hee powered on the smelting equipment, the heating element glowing red as it warmed up. You know what? I like you. Genuinely. In another life, we might have been friends. She picked up the hairpin with Kong's, holding it over the heat. But in this life, you're a problem that needs solving, so I'm solving it. The pin began to glow, the sterling silver responding to the heat. Ashanti watched, forcing herself not to look away, honoring her grandmother's legacy by witnessing its destruction without flinching. The metal softened, drooped, lost its shape and purpose, becoming just formless silver that dripped into a collection pan below. The 20,000 viewers watched it happen, and Ashanti felt something break inside her that wasn't quite what Sun Hee intended. Not defeat, but release. The pin had been a talisman, a connection to her grandmother, a symbol of skills and legacy, but it had also been a burden, a reminder of expectations she'd never asked for. There, Ashanti announced to the camera with satisfaction, the legendary hairpin reduced to scrap metal, just like any legend when you apply enough pressure. She turned off the equipment and angled the camera toward Ashanti. And here's the legendary warrior herself. Captured, restrained, watching her symbol destroyed. This is what happens when you fight systems too big to overcome. Ashanti met the camera lens one more time. No, this is what happens during the second act, the part where things get dark before they get better, the part where the hero loses everything before discovering what actually matters. She smiled despite everything. Thanks for the motivation. Sun Hee's expression flickered with uncertainty, but she covered it quickly, ending the live stream and dismantling her equipment. You're either delusional or playing a psychological game I don't understand. Maybe both. Ashanti tested her restraints again, still secure, still professionally installed. What happens now? You've made your point to your 20,000 witnesses, the pin is destroyed. Do I get released like you promised, or was that just for the cameras? Released, eventually. But first, you're going to send a message to Lee Ji-hoon. Sun Hee pulled out her phone, opening a video recording. You're going to tell him that fighting back against my family is pointless, that he should accept our terms for territorial division, that resistance will result in more people like the Parks getting caught in crossfire. And if I refuse, then the Parks don't get released unharmed like I promised. Simple incentive structure. Sun Hee held up the phone. Your choice. Be a symbol of defiance and 3 innocent people suffer, or be practical and everyone goes home eventually. Ashanti thought about Mr. Park Sr.'s pride in his warehouse legacy, about David's protective care for his father, about Michelle's skeptical strength. Innocent people caught in conflicts they never asked for, pawns in a game between criminal organizations, just like she'd been 6 months ago. Ordinary person in the wrong place at the wrong time. Fine, she said. Record your message, but I'm saying it my way, not reading a script. Fair enough. Sun Hee positioned the camera. Go. Ashanti looked into the lens, thinking carefully about every word. Lee, this is Ashanti. I'm secured somewhere I don't know, unharmed for now. Baek Sun Hee wants me to tell you that fighting back is pointless, that you should accept her terms. She paused. I'm not going to tell you that. You make your own strategic decisions. But I will tell you this, the parks are innocent. Whatever happens between our organizations, they don't deserve to be caught in the middle. Prioritize getting them released safely. Everything else is secondary. Sun He frowned but didn't stop recording. That's not the message I asked for. It's the message you're getting. Take it or leave it. Ashanti held the camera's gaze. And Lee, remember what you said about legends being mortal? You were right. But mortality doesn't mean powerlessness. It means choosing what matters before time runs out. Enough. Sun He ended the recording, her expression unreadable. You're either the bravest person I've met or the most self-destructive. Still going with both. Ashanti leaned back in her chair as much as restraints allowed. Are we done here? Almost. Sun He made another call in Korean, brief, clipped, giving orders. Then she turned back to Ashanti. Change of plans. You've become more interesting than anticipated. So instead of simple release and humiliation, I'm going to make you an offer. Not interested in joining your organization if that's where this is going. Not joining, competing. Sun He's smile returned, sharper now. Here's the situation. Lee Ji-hoon won't accept my territorial terms without significant pressure, but direct warfare between our organizations would be expensive, bloody, and draw unwanted attention from authorities we've both spent years bribing into complacency. So instead, I propose a competition. What kind of competition? The kind that decides everything. 3 challenges over 3 days. You represent Lee's interests. My champion represents mine. Whoever wins 2 out of 3 challenges claims the disputed territories, the warehouse, and supremacy in Chicago's Korean underworld. Sun He leaned forward. And yes, before you ask, this is partially about spectacle. The video of you defeating 30 assassins went viral. Imagine the interest in watching you compete formally, with rules and structure, and everything documented. Ashanti's mind raced through implications. And if I refuse? Then we default to the expensive, bloody warfare option, which Lee might win, he's resourceful, but which would definitely cost innocent lives, including possibly the parks depending on how chaotic things get. Sun He shrugged. Or you accept, give everyone a cleaner resolution, and maybe recover some of that legendary status you just watched melt. What are the challenges? Physical combat, obviously, though not to the death. Strategic thinking, something that tests mental acuity over pure violence, and a third challenge to be determined based on how the first 2 go. Sun He pulled out a tablet showing documents. Full terms, negotiated with Lee if he accepts. Neutral judges, clear rules, everything documented for posterity and accountability. Why would Lee agree to this? Why would he risk everything on me winning some formalized competition? Because the alternative is worse, and because he believes in you. I've seen his security reports, watched how he's positioned you within his organization. You're not just an enforcer to him, you're a symbol of what his organization can be. Winning this competition would cement that. Sun He's expression turned almost respectful, and honestly, I want to test you properly. The warehouse fight was a capture operation, designed to succeed through numbers and tactics, but I want to know how good you really are when the playing field is level. Ashanti studied the woman across from her, criminal mind master, strategic thinker, someone who'd planned this entire scenario from the warehouse meeting to the live stream to this exact conversation. Brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. If I agree, and I win, the parks go free immediately. No retaliation, no future threats. Agreed. And if I lose, Lee cedes his Korean territories to my family. You retire from any organizational involvement, and the parks still go free, because I keep my word. Sun He extended her hand toward Ashanti, realized the restraints prevented shaking, and laughed. Do we have a deal in principle, pending Lee's approval? Pending Lee's approval, Ashanti agreed. But I want to talk to him before committing, make sure he understands what this means. Fair enough. Sun He made another call, spoke briefly in Korean, then nodded. He's being brought here. You'll have 15 minutes to discuss. I suggest using them wisely. They moved Ashanti to a different room, still restrained but in a chair that wasn't bolted down, allowing some mobility. Lee arrived 10 minutes later looking exhausted but unharmed, his own restraints removed in a show of good faith for the negotiation. Innocent people caught in conflicts they never asked for, pawns in a game between criminal organizations, just like she'd been 6 months ago. Ordinary person in the wrong place at the wrong time. Fine, she said. Record your message, but I'm saying it my way, not reading a script. Fair enough. Sun Hee positioned the camera. Go. Ashanti looked into the lens, thinking carefully about every word. Lee, this is Ashanti. I'm secured somewhere I don't know, unharmed for now. Baek Sun Hee wants me to tell you that fighting back is pointless, that you should accept her terms. She paused. I'm not going to tell you that. You make your own strategic decisions. But I will tell you this, the Parks are innocent. Whatever happens between our organizations, they don't deserve to be caught in the middle. Prioritize getting them released safely. Everything else is secondary. Sun Hee frowned but didn't stop recording. That's not the message I asked for. It's the message you're getting. Take it or leave it. Ashanti held the camera's gaze. And Lee, remember what you said about legends being mortal? You were right. But mortality doesn't mean powerlessness. It means choosing what matters before time runs out. Enough. Sun Hee ended the recording, her expression unreadable. You're either the bravest person I've met or the most self-destructive. Still going with both. Ashanti leaned back in her chair as much as restraints allowed. Are we done here? Almost. Sun Hee made another call in Korean, brief, clipped, giving orders. Then she turned back to Ashanti. Change of plans. You've become more interesting than anticipated. So instead of simple release and humiliation, I'm going to make you an offer. Not interested in joining your organization if that's where this is going. Not joining, competing. Sun Hee's smile returned, sharper now. Here's the situation. Lee Ji-hoon won't accept my territorial terms without significant pressure, but direct warfare between our organizations would be expensive, bloody, and draw unwanted attention from authorities we've both spent years bribing into complacency. So instead, I propose a competition. What kind of competition? The kind that decides everything. 3 challenges over 3 days. You represent Lee's interests. My champion represents mine. Whoever wins 2 out of 3 challenges claims the disputed territories, the warehouse, and supremacy in Chicago's Korean underworld. Sun Hee leaned forward. And yes, before you ask, this is partially about spectacle. The video of you defeating 30 assassins went viral. Imagine the interest in watching you compete formally, with rules and structure, and everything documented. Ashanti's mind raced through implications. And if I refuse, then we default to the expensive, bloody warfare option, which Lee might win, he's resourceful, but which would definitely cost innocent lives, including possibly the Parks depending on how chaotic things get. Sun Hee shrugged. Or you accept, give everyone a cleaner resolution, and maybe recover some of that legendary status you just watched melt. What are the challenges? Physical combat, obviously, though not to the death. Strategic thinking, something that tests mental acuity over pure violence, and a third challenge to be determined based on how the first 2 go. Sun Hee pulled out a tablet showing documents. Full terms, negotiated with Lee if he accepts. Neutral judges, clear rules, everything documented for posterity and accountability. Why would Lee agree to this? Why would he risk everything on me winning some formalized competition? Because the alternative is worse, and because he believes in you. I've seen his security reports, watched how he's positioned you within his organization. You're not just an enforcer to him, you're a symbol of what his organization can be. Winning this competition would cement that. Sun Hee's expression turned almost respectful, and honestly, I want to test you properly. The warehouse fight was a capture operation, designed to succeed through numbers and tactics, but I want to know how good you really are when the playing field is level. Ashanti studied the woman across from her, criminal mind master, strategic thinker, someone who'd planned this entire scenario from the warehouse meeting to the live stream to this exact conversation. Brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. If I agree, and I win, the Parks go free immediately. No retaliation, no future threats. Agreed. And if I lose? Lee cedes his Korean territories to my family. You retire from any organizational involvement, and the parks still go free, because I keep my word. Sun-hee extended her hand toward Ashanti, realized the restraints prevented shaking, and laughed. Do we have a deal in principle, pending Lee's approval? Pending Lee's approval, Ashanti agreed. But I want to talk to him before committing, make sure he understands what this means. Fair enough. Sun-hee made another call, spoke briefly in Korean, then nodded. He's being brought here. You'll have 15 minutes to discuss. I suggest using them wisely. They moved Ashanti to a different room, still restrained but in a chair that wasn't bolted down, allowing some mobility. Lee arrived 10 minutes later, looking exhausted but unharmed, his own restraints removed in a show of good faith for the negotiation. Are you hurt? His first question, always practical. Physically? No. Symbolically, Ashanti gestured at the empty space where her hairpin used to be. She melted it, live-streamed the destruction to 20,000 people. Lee's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was just metal. Ashanti met his eyes. But this competition she's proposing, is it legitimate? Can we trust her to honor the terms? Sun-hee is many things, but she's honorable within her own code. If she structures this formally with neutral judges and clear terms, she'll abide by the results. The question is whether you can win. Against her champion? I don't even know who that is. Neither do I, which concerns me. Lee pulled up a chair, sitting across from her despite the guards watching from the doorway. But here's what I know. Sun-hee wouldn't propose this unless she believed she had advantage. She studied you, learned your patterns, and she's choosing competition over warfare for a reason. That means her champion is either incredibly skilled or strategically positioned to exploit your weaknesses. So, you think I should refuse? I think you should know what you're walking into. Lee's voice dropped lower. 6 months ago, you saved my life with a hairpin and instinct. Since then, you've become essential to my organization, but we've also pushed you into a role you never asked for. This competition, if you accept, needs to be your choice, not mine. Not because I need you to save my territories or my pride, because you want to prove something to yourself. Ashanti appreciated the honesty, even as she questioned his motives. And if I say no, if I tell you to fight your own battles while I retire to my studio apartment and pretend the past 6 months didn't happen, then I fight my own battles and respect your decision. You don't owe me anything beyond what you've already given. Lee stood. But I will say this. You told those 20,000 people watching that the legend was never the point, that ordinary people have more strength than expected. Here's your chance to prove it. Not with viral videos or accidental heroics, but with intentional choice and structured competition. Win or lose, that means something. Poetic philosophy from a crime boss. I contain multitudes. He smiled slightly. So, what do you say? Do we accept Sun-hee's competition, or do we decline and prepare for expensive warfare? Ashanti thought about everything that had led to this moment. Her grandmother's training, the night at Constellation, 6 months of learning to navigate criminal enterprises while maintaining some sense of self. She thought about the parks and their warehouse legacy, about Lee's organization and its complicated ethics, about Bae Sun-hee and her strategic brilliance. But mostly she thought about that live stream, about telling 20,000 people that fighting back mattered even when you lost, that legends were less important than the choice to keep standing. Tell Sun-hee we accept, Ashanti said, with one addition to the terms. What addition? When I win, not if. When I win, she publicly acknowledges that the hairpin was never the source of my strength, that destroying it accomplished nothing except making a better story. Ashanti smiled. I want her to admit that legends aren't made of symbols, they're made of choices. Lee's expression shifted into something like pride. I'll negotiate those terms. And Ashanti, for what it's worth, I believe you will win. Not because you're superhuman, because you're you. He left to finalize negotiations with Sun-hee, leaving Ashanti alone with her thoughts and her missing hairpin and her grandmother's voice echoing one more time, "We survive, baby girl," and sometimes survival looks like walking into danger instead of running from it. The competition terms took 8 hours to negotiate fully, Lee and Sun Hee working through details with the precision of lawyers drafting international treaties. Ashanti was moved to more comfortable quarters during this time, her restraints removed, given food and water and time to rest. Sun Hee, whatever else she was, apparently believed in fighting fair once the terms were set. At 3 a.m., Lee returned with the finalized contract, 17 pages of legal language that boiled down to 3 challenges over 3 days, neutral judges from organizations not affiliated with either the Hyundai Network or Bay family, clear victory conditions, and binding consequences for both sides. Day 1 is physical combat, but not to the death. First to 3 disabling strikes wins. Day 2 is strategic challenge. They're calling it the Gauntlet, involves navigating a constructed scenario while achieving objectives. Day 3, he paused, depends on results of first 2. If you win both, we win by default. If we split 1-1, the third challenge gets determined by neutral judges based on what they think best tests capability. And her champion? Someone called Park Jin-woo. Male, mid-30s, former Korean Special Forces, has been working for the Baek family for 5 years. Sun Hee's reports say he's undefeated in 17 formal combat challenges. Lee met her eyes. He's good, Ashanti. Possibly better than the 30 men you fought at Constellation, because this time it's one-on-one. Formal rules, no element of surprise. So I'm the underdog. Ashanti found herself smiling despite the pressure. Good. Underdogs make better stories. This isn't a story. This is your life and my organization and innocent people's safety. It's always a story. The question is whether we write it ourselves or let other people write it for us. Ashanti signed the contract without hesitation. When do we start? 6 hours. Sun Hee is arranging the venue, a neutral location with proper safety equipment and medical personnel standing by. She's also live streaming the entire thing, naturally. Lee looked uncomfortable. She's positioning this as sequel to your viral video, Hairpin Warrior Returns kind of branding. Of course she is. This was always about spectacle and control. Ashanti stood, testing her body, stiff from restraints but functional, adrenaline starting to build. I need to prepare, physically and mentally. I've arranged for Haewon to brief you on Park Jin-woo's fighting style. We pulled footage from his previous challenges. And Ashanti, Lee's voice carried weight. You don't have to win for me to respect what you're doing. Just knowing you chose to fight instead of running means everything. Save the sentimentality for after I win. Ashanti headed for the door, then paused. Actually, one question. Why did my grandmother teach me all this? You have access to intelligence resources I don't. What do you know about her past? Lee was quiet for a moment. I know she came to America in 1969. I know she disappeared from certain organizations' records around that same time. And I know those organizations were the kind that trained people for very specific, very dangerous purposes. He met her gaze. Your grandmother was either exactly what she claimed, a housekeeper who happened to know self-defense, or she was someone who became a housekeeper after being someone else entirely. I suspect the latter. Why? Because the skills she taught you aren't random. They're systematic, comprehensive, designed to make you survive against overwhelming odds. That's not hobby knowledge. That's professional training from someone who lived the life and wanted you prepared for it. Lee paused. She protected you by becoming invisible. You're protecting others by becoming legendary. Maybe that's the Davis family way. Survive by being exactly what the moment requires. Ashanti absorbed this, thinking about the grandmother she'd known. Gentle, loving, occasionally fierce in ways that seemed disproportionate to housework and childcare. A woman who'd played games that weren't games, who'd filed a hairpin sharp just in case, who'd prepared her granddaughter for a life she'd never explained. Then I'll honor her by winning, Ashanti said simply. Where's Haewon? Let's start analyzing this Park Jin-woo and finding his weaknesses. The next 5 hours dissolved into preparation that felt like cramming for an exam where failure meant losing everything. Haewon, Lee's head of security, pulled up footage from Park Jin-woo's previous challenges. 17 fights, all victories, ranging from quick knockouts to prolonged technical battles that showcased his versatility. He's trained in multiple disciplines, Haewon explained, pausing footage to highlight specific techniques. Taekwondo Foundation, probably from military service, but also Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and what looks like Krav Maga for dirty fighting when rules allow it. He's ambidextrous, switches stances fluidly, and has excellent conditioning. None of his fights shows him getting tired even when they go long. Weaknesses? Pride. Watch here. Haewon scrubbed to a specific moment. His opponent feints weakness, and Jin Woo takes the bait, overcommits to finish quickly. He recovers fast enough to still win, but that instinct to dominate rather than strategize is exploitable. Ashanti studied the footage, memorizing patterns and tendencies. Jin Woo was good, exceptional even, but he fought like someone who'd always won, who expected victory because experience had taught him he was superior. That confidence was strength, but also vulnerability. What about his record outside formal challenges? Street fights, real combat situations? Unknown. The Baek family keeps that information sealed, but his challenge record is public within our circles. 17 wins, 0 losses, 3 knockouts, 14 technical victories. Haewon pulled up another video. This is his most recent fight, 3 months ago. Watch how he adapts when his opponent tries grappling. They studied footage until Ashanti's eyes burned, until it felt familiar as her own reflection. But familiar didn't mean beatable. He was skilled, experienced, and fighting for an organization that had invested significantly in his training. At 8:45 a.m., Tae-young recovered from his head wound and furious about being taken down during the warehouse capture, drove Ashanti and Lee to the venue Sun Hee had arranged, an abandoned factory converted into a formal combat space, complete with padded flooring, medical stations, cameras positioned for optimal angles, and seating for the neutral judges and limited witnesses. Sun Hee waited at the entrance, dressed like she was attending a corporate board meeting rather than an underground combat challenge. "Good morning, Miss Davis. Sleep well?" "Well enough. You?" "Wonderfully. I always sleep well before proving a point." Sun Hee gestured toward the interior. "Everything is prepared to specifications in the contract. 3 judges, 1 from a Vietnamese organization, 1 from a Russian syndicate, 1 from a Mexican cartel. None of them have direct interest in our territorial dispute, so their judging should be fair. First to 3 disabling strikes wins. Medical personnel standing by in case of serious injury. And Jin Woo? Already inside, warming up. He's excited to face you, says defeating the legendary hairpin warrior will be his crowning achievement." Sun Hee smiled. "I do hope you give him a good fight before losing. Spectacle matters for the live stream." Ashanti entered the factory without responding, focusing on her breathing and centering and the dozens of preparation techniques her grandmother had taught through those backyard games. The interior was exactly as promised, professional setup that looked more like a sanctioned MMA event than an underground criminal competition. Park Jin-woo stood in the center of the padded area, stretching with fluid grace that spoke of years training his body into a weapon. He was exactly as the footage suggested, mid-30s, lean muscle without bulk, the relaxed confidence of someone who'd never lost. When he saw Ashanti, his expression shifted into something between respect and anticipation. "Miss Davis," he bowed slightly, formal. "I've watched your video many times. You're quite skilled." "Thanks. I've watched your videos too. You're better than everyone you've faced." "Yes, no false modesty, just acknowledgement. But they weren't you. This will be interesting." The judges took their positions, 3 severe-looking individuals representing their respective organizations, positioned with clear sightlines to the combat area. Lee stood with Haewon and Tae-young in the designated witness section. Sun Hee positioned herself near the live stream cameras, ready to narrate the spectacle. The lead judge, a Vietnamese woman who'd introduced herself only as Madame Tran, stepped forward with a microphone. "The rules are simple. First combatant to land 3 disabling strikes wins. Disabling strike is defined as a blow that renders a limb temporarily unusable, a strike that causes loss of consciousness even briefly, or a technique that forces verbal submission. Strikes to eyes, throat, and groin are prohibited. Killing strikes are prohibited and result in immediate forfeiture and criminal consequences. Medical personnel will intervene if either combatant is seriously endangered. She looked at both fighters. Acknowledge understanding? Understood, Ashanti and Jin Woo said simultaneously. Then begin when ready. Madame Tran stepped back, and the other judges activated their scoring tablets. Jin Woo and Ashanti circled each other, maintaining distance, both evaluating and calculating. The factory was silent, except for their footsteps on padded flooring and the distant hum of live stream equipment. Somewhere people were watching, maybe thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, drawn by the promise of seeing the viral warrior fight formally. Jin Woo struck first, a testing combination, jab, cross, leg kick, gauging Ashanti's response time and defensive patterns. She slipped the punches, checked the kick, and immediately counterattacked with her own combination aimed at his lead leg. He danced back, smiled. Fast, good. He switched stances, presenting his other side. Let's see how you adapt. The fight accelerated into fluid violence, both fighters probing for weaknesses, testing ranges and timing, building a mental map of the other's capabilities. Jin Woo was exactly as advertised. Technical precision, smooth transitions between striking and grappling range, ambidextrous attacks that kept Ashanti guessing. But Ashanti had advantages he hadn't faced before. Her grandmother's training wasn't formal martial arts, it was survival technique refined over a lifetime, focused on ending threats with maximum efficiency. She didn't fight to showcase technique or score points, she fought to disable and dominate. 3 minutes in, she found her first opening. Jin Woo committed to a spinning back kick, beautiful technique, power and speed, but it required taking his eyes off her for a split second. Ashanti exploded forward into that blind spot, caught his planted leg with a heel kick to the back of the knee, and felt his leg buckle. He went down hard, but rolled immediately, training overriding pain. But his right leg wouldn't support full weight anymore. Not broken, but badly hyperextended. The judges confirmed. First disabling strike, Davis. Jin Woo's expression shifted from confidence to focus. He'd been hurt, genuinely hurt for the first time in these formal challenges. His fighting style adapted immediately, favoring his left leg, incorporating more upper body techniques to compensate. They circled again, more cautious now. Jin Woo's pride had taken the bait earlier, Ashanti pretending to leave an opening that she'd actually been protecting, but he wouldn't fall for that twice. This time, he attacked with disciplined aggression, combinations designed to set up his finishing techniques rather than end things quickly. Ashanti found herself on the defensive, blocking and parrying and giving ground as Jin Woo pressed his advantage. His injured leg slowed him down but didn't stop him, and his technical skill meant he could still generate significant power from limited mobility. An elbow strike grazed her temple, too light to qualify as disabling, but enough to remind her that one solid connection could change everything. She needed to end this before his experience and conditioning overcame his injury. Ashanti feinted toward his damaged leg, drawing his defense downward, then exploded upward with a jumping knee to his solar plexus. Impact. Air rushed from his lungs. He staggered back, guard dropping, and Ashanti followed with a precise strike to his shoulder, not to injure permanently, but to dead-arm his right side. Second disabling strike, Davis. The judge's confirmation came as Jin Woo struggled to raise his right arm, the nerve cluster in his shoulder temporarily paralyzed. 2 down, 1 to go. But Jin Woo wasn't finished. Even injured and compromised, he was dangerous. He switched to a southpaw stance, compensating for his damaged right side by leading with his left, and his expression had shifted from focus to something darker. Desperation mixed with determination. "You're better than I expected," he admitted, breathing hard. "But I haven't lost yet. First time for everything." He came at her with everything he had left, a flurry of left-handed strikes mixed with unorthodox techniques, sacrificing defense for overwhelming offense. Ashanti weathered the assault, taking minor hits to avoid major damage, waiting for the opening she knew would come. It came when Jinwoo overcommitted to a haymaker left hook, putting all his remaining power into one finishing blow. Ashanti didn't dodge. She moved inside it, absorbed the glancing impact on her forearm, and caught his extended arm. Using his momentum and her leverage, she executed a textbook armbar takedown, controlling his elbow joint with precision that threatened hyperextension. Jinwoo had one choice: submit or risk permanent damage. His free hand tapped the mat 3 times, universal signal for submission. Third disabling strike via submission, Davis. Victor Ashanti Davis. Madam Tran's announcement echoed through the factory. The medical personnel rushed in immediately, checking both fighters. Jinwoo's injuries were painful but not permanent. His knee would need rest and physical therapy. His shoulder would recover in a few days. His pride would take longer. Ashanti had bruises blooming across her ribs and arms, a split lip from a strike she hadn't fully blocked, but nothing serious. Lee was there immediately, offering water and a towel and quiet congratulations. Sun-hee watched from her camera position, expression unreadable. Jinwoo accepted medical attention with dignity, then approached Ashanti before leaving. "You won fairly," he said, bowing respectfully despite his injuries. "I underestimated you. That was my mistake." "You're skilled," Ashanti replied honestly. "In different circumstances, this could have gone differently. Perhaps, but today, you were better." He limped away, supported by Baek medical personnel, leaving Ashanti to process what had just happened. She'd won. First challenge complete, 1-0 lead in the competition. But 2 more challenges remained, and Sun-hee wouldn't make the same mistake Jinwoo had made, underestimating her opponent. Sun-hee approached as the judges were packing up, her expression carefully neutral. "Congratulations, that was entertaining for the live stream. How many people watched?" 300,000 at peak, trending across multiple platforms. Sun-hee pulled up her tablet showing analytics. "You're even more viral than before. #HairpinWarrior returns is trending globally. Comments are overwhelmingly supportive of you." She looked up, which honestly makes tomorrow's challenge more interesting. Public opinion can be powerful pressure. What's tomorrow's challenge? The gauntlet. Strategic thinking, problem-solving, ability to achieve objectives while under pressure. We'll brief you on specifics tonight. 8 hours to rest and prepare. Sun-hee's smile returned, sharp. "Enjoy your victory, Miss Davis, but remember, we've only begun, and I learn from mistakes even faster than Jinwoo did." She left, taking her cameras and personnel, leaving Ashanti with Lee and his team in the abandoned factory that smelled like sweat and victory and uncertainty about what came next. "You did well," Lee said quietly. "Better than well. But Sun-hee's right, she'll adapt. Whatever tomorrow's challenge is, it'll be designed specifically to counter your strengths." "Then I'll adapt too." Ashanti accepted the water bottle Taeyong offered, drinking deeply. "That's what survival means. Adapting faster than the threats evolve. Your grandmother taught you that? My grandmother lived that. I'm just learning to follow her example." They left the factory, heading back to Lee's headquarters for debriefing and rest and preparation for day 2 of a competition that would determine the fate of territories and organizations and lives Ashanti never expected to be responsible for. But as she sat on the back of Taeyong's SUV, watching Chicago pass by through tinted windows, Ashanti thought about those 300,000 people who'd watched her win, people who'd seen her fight without her legendary hairpin, who'd watched her defeat a champion through skill and determination rather than symbolic weapons. Maybe Sun-hee had been right about one thing. Destroying the hairpin had made a better story. Not the story Sun-hee intended, about legends being mortal and resistance being futile, but a story about how strength came from within, how symbols mattered less than choices, how ordinary people could become extraordinary through refusing to quit. That was a story worth fighting for, even if it meant walking into 2 more challenges designed to break her. 1 challenge down, 2 to go. Comment below. Do you think Ashanti can keep winning, or will Sun-hee's adaptations prove too much? Your prediction might be right, or you might be surprised by what comes next. The safe house Lee provided was 3 blocks from his headquarters, a converted loft with reinforced doors, surveillance systems, and enough supplies to survive a siege. Ashanti collapsed onto the couch at 2 p.m., every muscle screaming protest from the morning's fight, and fell into sleep so deep it felt like drowning. She woke to her phone buzzing at 8 p.m. 6 hours gone in what felt like 6 minutes. The screen showed a text from an unknown number with a video attachment. Against her better judgment, she opened it. The video showed a small apartment, familiar apartment, her apartment, with Mrs. Chen from the second floor tied to a chair, terrified, crying silently through a gag. The camera panned to show 3 armed men standing guard, then focused on a note held up to the camera. Tomorrow's challenge begins now. The gauntlet isn't in some constructed scenario. It's in the real world, with real consequences. We have 6 civilians from your life. Mrs. Chen, your friend Keisha, 3 former co-workers from Constellation, and someone else you'll recognize. They're secured in 6 different locations across Chicago. Your challenge? Find and free all 6 before midnight tomorrow, while our teams actively hunt you. Every civilian you fail to save suffers consequences. Every hour past midnight, we release one to authorities with evidence linking them to criminal activity that will destroy their lives. Good luck, Miss Davis. The gauntlet starts in 12 hours at 8 a.m. Soon he. The video ended. Ashanti stared at her screen, rage and terror mixing into something that made her hands shake. This wasn't a strategic challenge, this was terrorism, kidnapping innocent people to force her into an impossible scenario. She called Lee immediately. He answered before the first ring finished. "I saw it," he said, his voice tight with anger. "She sent it to me, too, along with formal notification that this constitutes the second challenge per the contract's strategic gauntlet clause. I'm having my lawyers review whether this violates the spirit of our agreement, but technically, I don't care about technicalities." Ashanti was on her feet, pacing the safe house like a caged animal. "She kidnapped innocent people from my life. Mrs. Chen is 70 years old with a heart condition. Keisha has nothing to do with any of this. How is this not terrorism? Because we signed a contract that gave Soon Hee latitude to define strategic challenge, and she's interpreting that broadly." Lee's voice carried fury beneath professional calm. "I'm mobilizing every resource we have to locate these civilians before 8 a.m. But Ashanti, you need to prepare for the possibility that we won't find them all in time." "Then what? I just let them suffer because Soon Hee decided to rewrite the rules?" "No, you enter the gauntlet and you win, because that's the only way to guarantee their safety. Complete the challenge successfully. Prove you're still the legend Soon Hee tried to destroy." Lee paused. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know this crosses lines that shouldn't be crossed, but refusing to participate means those 6 people definitely suffer. Participation at least offers hope. What resources can you give me?" "Everything I have. Taeyong and a tactical team will support you remotely. They can't participate directly per the challenge rules, but they can provide intelligence and logistics. Haewon is analyzing Soon Hee's properties and known locations to narrow search parameters. And I'm calling in favors from every organization we have relations with to put pressure on the Baek family to release locations early." His voice hardened. "This is unconscionable, even by our world standards. Sun Hee will pay for this regardless of challenge outcomes. Save the revenge planning for after we get them back safely." Ashanti forced herself to breathe slowly, to think strategically instead of emotionally. "Send me everything you have on potential locations. I'll start planning routes and contingencies." "Ashanti?" Lee's voice softened slightly. "You don't have to be a legend right now. You're allowed to be scared and angry and human. Being human is what made me a legend in the first place." She ended the call and pulled up the video again, studying every frame for clues, background details, ambient sounds, anything that might reveal locations. Mrs. Chen's apartment showed the familiar peeling wallpaper Ashanti had seen 100 times, which meant Sun Hee's people had taken her from her own home. Bold and terrifying. It meant nowhere was safe. No one in Ashanti's life was untouchable. The former Constellation co-workers were harder to identify from the brief glimpses, but she recognized Tommy Huang, the floor manager who'd been riding her before everything changed, looking absolutely terrified. And then there was the sixth civilian, the someone else you'll recognize that Sun Hee had mentioned but not shown. That omission felt deliberate, designed to maximize psychological pressure. Who else from Ashanti's life could Sun Hee have taken? Her grandmother was dead. She had no other close family. Most of her friendships had dissolved over the past 6 months as her new life consumed her time and energy. Unless... Her phone buzzed again. Different unknown number, this time with a photo attachment. Ashanti opened it and felt her heart stop. Mr. Park Sr., sitting in what looked like a warehouse, not his warehouse, somewhere else, looking exhausted and confused, but unharmed. The message below the photo read, "Surprise! I said the Parks would go free if they agreed to sell to us. They didn't agree, so now Mr. Park Sr. is civilian number 6. Seems fitting, doesn't it? You fought so hard to protect them at the warehouse, now you get to do it again. Only this time you're racing against a clock, and my entire organization. Sun Hee." Ashanti threw her phone across the room, watched it hit the wall and clatter to the floor, and screamed her frustration at empty space. This was beyond strategy or competition. This was Sun Hee demonstrating absolute power, showing that she could reach anyone, take anyone, make anyone suffer to prove a point. The phone survived its impact. Lee's tech team built them resilient, and buzzed again from where it had fallen. Ashanti retrieved it, saw a call from Haywan, and answered. "We've narrowed potential locations to 43 properties across Chicago that the Beck family owns or has access to," Haywan said without preamble. "I'm sending you the list now with probability rankings based on security features, proximity to your known locations, and historical usage patterns. The top 12 are most likely. 12 locations, 6 civilians, 8 hours until the challenge officially starts." Ashanti pulled up the list on her phone, studying the addresses. "What's the plan?" "Taeyong is assembling a team to scout the top 6 locations starting at midnight. They can't intervene directly, that would violate challenge rules and give Sun Hee justification to forfeit, but they can confirm civilian presence and provide real-time intelligence." Haywan's voice carried military precision. "Once the challenge starts at 8 a.m., you'll have 16 hours to locate and free all 6. That's roughly 2 hours and 40 minutes per location, assuming no complications." "There will be complications. Sun Hee promised her teams would actively hunt me." "Yes, which is why we're providing you with tactical equipment, comm unit for constant contact with our team, GPS tracker so we can coordinate your movements, non-lethal weapons that comply with challenge rules." Haywan paused. "And Ashanti, Lee wants me to emphasize that your safety matters too. Don't sacrifice yourself trying to save everyone. Sometimes the best strategic move is, I'm not leaving anyone behind." Ashanti's voice came out harder than intended. "Sun Hee took innocent people from my life to prove a point. I'm getting them all back, or I'm not coming back at all. That's what I told Lee you'd say." Haywan actually sounded approving. "I'm glad I was right. Headquarters at midnight for equipment and final briefing." The hours until midnight stretched like torture. Ashanti tried to rest, knowing she'd need every ounce of energy for tomorrow, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling back to the civilians, Mrs. Chen with her heart condition, Keisha, who'd been her best friend since they were kids, Mr. Park Sr., who'd trusted her to honor his legacy, all of them suffering because she'd chosen to intervene 6 months ago, because she'd become visible instead of staying invisible. Would they be safer if I'd just stayed a waitress? The thought felt like betrayal, but Ashanti couldn't shake it. Before the viral video, before joining Lee's organization, her biggest concern had been paying rent on time. Now people were getting kidnapped because knowing her had become dangerous. Her grandmother's voice echoed, softer this time. "Davis women don't get to choose safe, baby girl. We get to choose standing up or staying down. Both have costs, but only one lets you sleep at night." At 11:45 p.m., Ashanti arrived at Lee's headquarters. The main conference room had been converted into a tactical operations center, multiple screens showing maps and satellite imagery, communications equipment, and a table covered in gear that looked military grade. Lee stood at the center, orchestrating multiple phone conversations in Korean and English, coordinating resources and calling in favors that probably cost him significantly. When he saw Ashanti, he wrapped up his current call and approached. Taeyong's teams have confirmed civilian presence at 4 of our top locations, he said, pointing to marked addresses on the main screen. Mrs. Chen is being held in a Beck-owned apartment building in Chinatown. 2 of your former co-workers are together in a warehouse near the port. Tommy Wong is secured in what looks like a Beck family restaurant in Koreatown. And Keisha, his expression darkened, Keisha is at Sun Hee's personal residence in Lincoln Park. Very public location, lots of security, extremely bold placement. That's 4. What about Mr. Park and the 6th co-worker? Still searching. We have 8 more locations to scout before 8 a.m. Lee pulled up additional screens. Here's what we know about Sun Hee's hunting teams. She's mobilized approximately 50 operatives divided into 5 teams of 10, positioned strategically across the city. They're armed with non-lethal weapons per challenge rules: tasers, flashbangs, restraint equipment. Their job is to slow you down, force you into difficult choices, make you waste time. So I need to avoid engagement when possible, move fast when I can't. Exactly. Haewon stepped forward with a tactical vest. This is your equipment. Reinforced vest, stops blunt trauma and low-caliber rounds. Communications unit with encrypted channel to our operations center. GPS tracker, first aid supplies, lock-picking tools. And this, she held up something that looked like a modified baton, extendable tactical staff, non-lethal but effective for defense. Ashanti took the staff, testing its weight and balance. Not her grandmother's hairpin, but it would work. The vest came next, surprisingly light despite its protection, followed by the comm unit that fit discreetly in her ear. Test the comms, Haewon instructed. Say something. This is Ashanti. Testing. Her voice echoed back through the operations center's speakers. Signal is clean, Taeyong confirmed from his station. We've got you on GPS and audio. When the challenge starts, we'll guide you to confirmed locations first, then assist with the remaining searches. Lee approached with a tablet showing the complete challenge rules Sun Hee had sent over. These are the official parameters. You have 16 hours, from 8 a.m. to midnight. For each civilian you successfully rescue and deliver to a neutral safe location, you score points. Rescue all 6, you win the challenge, regardless of how many times Sun Hee's teams intercept you. But, he highlighted a section, if you fail to rescue even 1 civilian by midnight, Sun Hee wins, and the consequence clause specifies that any civilian not rescued gets handed to authorities with fabricated evidence of criminal conspiracy. So it's all or nothing. All or nothing. Lee set down the tablet. Ashanti, if at any point this becomes impossible, if you're too injured to continue, if the situations become too dangerous, you tell us. We'll find another way to protect these people, even if it means conceding the challenge. There is no other way. Sun Hee designed this specifically to be unsolvable through anything except me completing it. Ashanti checked her equipment one final time. What time is it? 3 a.m. 5 hours until challenge start. Lee looked exhausted, worn down by the weight of responsibility and the knowledge that he'd brought Ashanti into this world that was now threatening everything she cared about. Try to rest. We'll wake you at 7:30 for final prep. But rest was impossible. Ashanti spent the remaining hours reviewing maps, memorizing routes, planning contingencies for every scenario she could imagine and several she couldn't. Taeyong's scouting teams confirmed 2 more civilian locations by 6 a.m. Mr. Park Sr. was indeed at a warehouse in the industrial district, and the final co-worker was secured in a Beck-controlled office building downtown. 6 civilians, 6 locations spread across Chicago, 16 hours, 50 hunters actively working to stop her. At 7:45 a.m., Ashanti stood in the headquarters parking garage, suited up and ready. Lee, Haewon, and Taeyong flanked her like an honor guard sending a soldier to war. Remember, Haewon said, speed is survival. Don't engage Sun Hee's teams unless absolutely necessary. Get in, get the civilian, get out. We'll have extraction vehicles positioned at strategic points across the city. And Ashanti? Lee's voice carried weight. When you win this, not if, when, Sun Hee will have one more challenge. Day 3. Whatever it is, it'll be designed to be absolutely impossible because she'll know you've beaten everything else. Be prepared for that. I'll worry about Day 3 when I survive Day 2. Ashanti tested her comm unit one more time. Hae-won, you're my primary contact? Affirmed. Tae-yong is your secondary if I'm unavailable. Lee will coordinate overall strategy and resource allocation. Hae-won handed her a motorcycle helmet. You're taking the Ducati, fastest vehicle we have, most maneuverable in Chicago traffic. Keys are in the ignition. The Ducati was a beautiful machine, black, sleek, capable of speeds that were probably illegal in most jurisdictions. Ashanti had learned to ride motorcycles at Lee's insistence 3 months ago, though she'd never been truly comfortable with the vulnerability of 2 wheels versus 4. But for this challenge, vulnerability was acceptable if it meant speed. She mounted the bike, started the engine, it purred like a predator, and checked the dashboard clock. 7:58 a.m. 2 minutes, she said into the comm. Where's my first target? Mrs. Chen in Chinatown, Hae-won responded. 12-minute ride from your position if you ignore traffic laws. Building is 4 stories. Back security on ground floor and roof. Civilian secured on 3rd floor. Best approach is from the adjacent building's fire escape. Understood. Starting now. Ashanti gunned the Ducati out of the parking garage exactly as the dashboard clock hit 8 a.m. The challenge had begun. The ride to Chinatown dissolved into pure focus, weaving through morning traffic, running red lights with calculated risk, using bike lanes and sidewalks when necessary. Hae-won provided constant updates through the comm. Left turn in 200 meters. Sun Hee's Team 3 is positioned 3 blocks east. Avoid that route. Parking structure ahead has roof access to your target building. Ashanti hit Chinatown at 8:11 a.m., 1 minute ahead of Hae-won's estimate. The target building was exactly as described. Older apartment complex with back security trying to look inconspicuous at the entrance. She parked the Ducati in the adjacent structure's ground level, grabbed her tactical staff, and headed for the stairs. Team 5 is moving toward your position, Hae-won warned. Estimated arrival 3 minutes. You need to be in and out by then. Working on it. Ashanti reached the parking structure's roof, evaluated the gap between buildings, 8 feet, manageable, and took a running start. The jump felt like flying briefly before landing hard on the target building's roof, rolling to absorb impact. The roof access door was locked. Ashanti pulled out lockpicks, worked the mechanism with fingers that remembered her grandmother's lessons, and had it open in 40 seconds. She descended the stairs quickly, counted floors, and emerged on the 3rd level. The hallway was empty except for one guard positioned outside apartment 3C, where Mrs. Chen was presumably held. The guard saw Ashanti, reached for his radio, and she was on him before he could speak. Tactical staff to his kneecap, non-lethal but disabling, followed by a strike to his temple that put him down unconscious. She dragged him into a maintenance closet, no point leaving evidence in the hallway, and approached 3C. The door was reinforced but not impossible. More lockpicking, more precious seconds ticking by, and then she was inside. Mrs. Chen sat tied to a chair in the living room. When she saw Ashanti, her eyes widened with recognition and relief and terror all mixed together. "It's okay," Ashanti said softly, cutting through the restraints with a knife from her vest. "I'm getting you out. Can you walk?" Mrs. Chen nodded, too terrified to speak. Ashanti helped her up, noted the trembling in the older woman's hands, and guided her toward the door. "Team 5 is in the building," Hae-won's voice crackled urgently. "Ground floor, heading up the stairs. You have maybe 90 seconds. Copy. Exiting via fire escape." Ashanti hit the apartment's window, helped Mrs. Chen onto the metal platform outside, and started the descent. 3 floors down, elderly woman in tow with trained hunters closing in. They hit the alley behind the building exactly as Team 5 burst onto the 3rd floor. Ashanti heard shouts above. They'd found the unconscious guard, knew she'd been here, but she was already moving, supporting Mrs. Chen, heading for the extraction point Hae-won designated 2 blocks south. Black sedan, license plate starting with HN, Hae-won specified. Driver is Min Soo. He'll take Mrs. Chen to secure medical care and debrief. The sedan was exactly where promised. Min Su, young professional, one of Lee's trusted operators, opened the back door and helped Mrs. Chen inside. "I've got her," he assured Ashanti. "She'll be safe." 1 down, 5 to go. Time elapsed, 27 minutes. Ashanti retrieved the Ducati and headed for Target 2, the warehouse near the port where two co-workers were held together. Haewon calculated it as a 15-minute ride, but Sun Hee's teams were adapting now, repositioning based on her first successful rescue. "Team 3 is moving to intercept you on your current route," Haewon warned. "Recommend alternative via the expressway. Adds 4 minutes but avoids engagement." "Negative. I don't have 4 minutes to spare. Sending me the most direct route to move through Team 3's position." Ashanti opened the throttle, the Ducati screaming through morning traffic. "That's going to be a fight. Then it's going to be a fight." Ashanti reached into her vest, pulled out flashbangs she'd been given for exactly this scenario. "Where's their position?" "Intersection of Wentworth and Archer. They've set up a vehicle barrier to force you to stop." Ashanti hit the intersection at 80 miles per hour, saw the barrier, 2 SUVs positioned to block the road, and the 10 operatives positioned behind them. She pulled the pin on a flashbang, threw it ahead of her trajectory, and accelerated directly toward the barrier. The explosion strobed white and loud. The operatives ducked instinctively. Ashanti used that split second to angle the Ducati between the SUV bumpers, scraping paint and probably damaging the bike, but clearing the barrier. Gunfire erupted behind her, rubber bullets and beanbag rounds that complied with challenge rules, but she was already gone, racing toward the port at speeds that would definitely result in arrest if any police were foolish enough to try stopping her. "That was insane," Haewon said into the comm, sounding impressed and horrified. "You're clear of Team 3. Target building is 2 minutes ahead." The warehouse was massive, industrial, with multiple entrances and minimal security. Sun Hee had confidence in her hunting teams intercepting Ashanti before she reached her targets. That confidence was misplaced. Ashanti ditched the Ducati in a loading bay, approached from the south entrance, and found it unlocked. Arrogance or invitation to a trap, either way, she didn't have choice. Inside, the warehouse stretched into darkness broken by sparse emergency lighting. "Civilians are on the second floor, northwest corner," Haewon directed. "No visible guards on thermal, but that doesn't mean they're not present." Ashanti moved through the shadows, tactical staff ready, listening for threats. The warehouse felt too quiet, too empty. Sun Hee had learned from Mrs. Chen's rescue she wouldn't make the same mistake of minimal security twice. The trap sprung when Ashanti reached the second-floor stairs. Lights flooded on simultaneously, temporarily blinding, and she heard the distinctive hiss of gas being released. Not lethal, challenge rules prevented that, but probably tear gas or some other incapacitating agent. She pulled her shirt over her nose and mouth, inadequate protection but better than nothing, and sprinted up the stairs through burning eyes and choking lungs. The northwest corner. Just get to the civilians and get out. They were there, 2 of her former Constellation co-workers, Sarah and Marcus, tied up and terrified. Ashanti cut their restraints quickly, gasping through the gas that filled the space. "Can you move?" she managed. They nodded, but mobile. She guided them back toward the stairs, down through the gas-filled warehouse, toward the south exit she'd entered through. But Team 2 had arrived. She saw their vehicles pulling up through the warehouse's grimy windows. "Alternative exit," Ashanti gasped into her comm. "East side. Loading dock is clear. Extraction vehicle incoming in 90 seconds. They burst out of the loading dock door, Sarah and Marcus stumbling but keeping pace. The extraction van screeched up exactly when promised. Different driver, same efficiency. Civilians loaded, doors closed, vehicle gone in under 20 seconds. 3 down, 3 to go. Time elapsed, 1 hour, 18 minutes. But Ashanti was slowing. The gas exposure had damaged her lungs, her eyes still burned and watered, and exhaustion was beginning to creep in around the edges of adrenaline. "I need 10 minutes, she told Haewon. "Somewhere safe to recover." "Copy. There's a one-day safe house 6 blocks northeast. I'll guide you there." The safe house was an unremarkable apartment that served as one of Lee's contingency locations. Ashanti stumbled inside, washed her eyes and face with water, used the provided inhaler to open her burning lungs, and allowed herself exactly 8 minutes of rest before forcing herself back to her feet. "Status," Ashanti asked Haewon. Tommy Huang in Koreatown, Keisha at Sun Hee's Lincoln Park residence, Mr. Park Sr. at the industrial warehouse. You're 40% through the time limit with 50% of rescues complete. Mathematically viable but tight. What's the fastest sequence? Tommy is closest, 8-minute ride, but his location has the heaviest security because it's an active bake restaurant, lots of civilians who could become collateral complications. Recommend going for Mr. Park next. 12 minutes away, isolated location, fewer potential complications. Ashanti considered the math. Tommy was closer but more complex. Mr. Park was further but cleaner. Keisha at Sun Hee's residence would be the hardest regardless of sequence. Mr. Park next, she decided. Then Tommy, then Keisha last. She mounted the Ducati again. The bike had taken damage from scraping through Team 3's barrier but still functioned, and headed toward the industrial district. Haewon narrated updates. Team 4 and Team 5 were consolidating around known civilian locations, making rescues harder with each passing hour. Sun Hee was adapting, learning, making Ashanti pay for every success. The industrial warehouse appeared abandoned from the outside, exactly the kind of location that screamed trap in every action movie ever made. Ashanti approached carefully, scanning for threats, and found the main entrance locked with security beyond her lockpicking skills. Service entrance on the west side, Haewon suggested. Thermal shows one guard inside, civilian secured in what looks like a former office. Ashanti circled to the west side, found the service entrance as described, and picked that lock successfully. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and empty except for remnants of old equipment and the single guard Haewon had identified. The guard was professional, spotted Ashanti almost immediately, called for backup on his radio, and engaged with tactical baton and confidence. Ashanti met him with her own staff, blocking and countering, grateful for Haewon's training that had refined her grandmother's techniques into something systematic. The fight lasted 40 seconds. The guard was skilled but not exceptional, trained for security work rather than actual combat. Ashanti disabled his weapon arm, swept his legs, and knocked him unconscious with precision that was becoming frighteningly automatic. Mr. Park Sr. was exactly where Thermal had indicated, secured in a former office, tied to a chair but unharmed. When he saw Ashanti, his elderly face broke into a relieved smile. "Miss Davis, I knew you would come. Can you walk quickly? We need to move fast. I am old, not broken. I can move." He stood with surprising steadiness once Ashanti cut his restraints. "Thank you for not abandoning us. I don't abandon people." She guided him toward the service entrance, listening for the backup the guard had called. "Stay close." They emerged into daylight exactly as Team 4 arrived. 2 vehicles, 10 operatives blocking their exit path. Ashanti calculated angles and odds and came up with nothing good. She couldn't fight 10 trained operatives while protecting an elderly man. Running would mean abandoning the Ducati, and staying put meant siege. "Haewon, I need options." "Working on it. Can you hold position for 3 minutes?" "Unlikely." Ashanti positioned Mr. Park behind a dumpster, providing cover, and prepared to engage. "I'll do what I can." Team 4 approached with professional coordination, flanking from multiple angles, using non-lethal weapons but overwhelming numbers. Ashanti met them with her staff, dropping 2 operatives quickly, but the others adapted, surrounding her, forcing her to defend rather than attack. A taser struck her left side, electricity coursed through her body, muscles seizing, and she went down hard. The operatives moved in to secure her, and Ashanti felt despair starting to creep in around the edges of her determination. She'd come so far, saved 4 people, but math was catching up. She couldn't defeat everyone, couldn't save everyone, couldn't be the legend people needed her to be. Davis women don't quit, baby girl. When you think you're finished, you find one more move. Always one more move. Ashanti found her one more move. As the operatives closed in, she triggered the flashbang on her vest, point-blank range, dangerous for her but devastating for them. The explosion threw everyone back, stunning the operatives and giving Ashanti the seconds she needed. She grabbed Mr. Park, half-carried him to the Ducati, and somehow got them both mounted before her vision fully cleared from the flashbang's after-effects. The bike screamed away from the warehouse, leaving Team 4 stumbling and confused behind them. "Extraction point is 2 blocks north," Haywan directed. "Can you make it?" "Making it." Ashanti's left side still tingled from the taser. Her vision swam from the flashbang, and every muscle screamed protest. But she made it, delivered Mr. Park to the waiting extraction vehicle, and watched him leave to safety. 4 down, 2 to go. Time elapsed 3 hours 47 minutes. She had 12 hours and 13 minutes to rescue Tommy and Keisha. Mathematically viable, practically terrifying. Status check. Lee's voice came through the comm for the first time since the challenge started. "Are you hurt?" "Functional, barely. You need to rest. Take an hour, recover properly, then continue." "Can't. Sun-Hee's teams are adapting faster than I'm moving. Every minute I rest, they fortify the remaining positions." Ashanti started the Ducati again. "Tommy next. What's the situation?" Haywan took over. "Beck Family Restaurant in Koreatown. Active dinner service starting at 5 p.m. Civilians secured in the basement. Heavy guard presence, lots of potential collateral if things go loud. So I need to be quiet." Ashanti checked her equipment. Tactical staff still functional, comm unit working, but she'd used her flashbangs and her body was deteriorating fast. "Give me the approach plan." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Wait for the dinner rush to start, enter through the front door like a normal customer, slip into the basement during the chaos, extract Tommy, and exit before security realized what happened. It required patience Ashanti didn't feel, and stealth she wasn't sure she could maintain in her current state. But it was the best option available, so at 5:17 p.m. she walked into the Beck Family Restaurant wearing a jacket over her tactical vest, looking like just another customer despite her exhaustion and injuries. The restaurant was crowded, good for cover, bad for maneuvering. She ordered at the front desk, got a table number, and watched the staff patterns while pretending to study the menu. The basement access was through the kitchen, protected by staff presence and a locked door. Ashanti waited for the dinner rush to peak at 5:40, then made her move, stood like she was heading for the bathroom, detoured through the kitchen door when nobody was watching, and picked the basement lock in 14 seconds. Tommy Huang was secured exactly where intelligence suggested, tied up but unharmed. When he saw Ashanti, his expression shifted through confusion, recognition, and something like shame. "You came," he whispered as she cut his restraints. "After how I treated you at Constellation, you still came. We're not leaving anyone behind. Can you walk?" "Yeah, let's go." They made it back into the kitchen before security realized something was wrong, made it halfway through the dining room before the alarm went up, made it to the front door before Team 3 and Team 5 converged on the restaurant from opposite directions. "Run!" Ashanti shoved Tommy toward an extraction vehicle that Haywan had positioned across the street, then turned to face the incoming teams. 20 operatives total, moving with lethal purpose despite their non-lethal weapons. She couldn't win this fight, couldn't even survive it for long enough to escape, but she could buy Tommy the 30 seconds he needed to reach the extraction vehicle. Ashanti planted herself in the restaurant's entrance, tactical staff ready, and prepared for the last stand she never wanted to make. The teams hit her like a wave. Ashanti fought with everything she had left, technique and desperation and her grandmother's legacy, dropping 3 operatives before they overwhelmed her through pure numbers. Tasers sparked, batons struck, and she went down under the pile of bodies trying to restrain her. Then gunfire erupted. Not rubber bullets or beanbags, actual gunfire. The operatives scattered, confused and seeking cover, and Ashanti saw Lee himself standing next to a bullet-riddled SUV, holding a smoking pistol, looking furious and terrified in equal measure. "Get her out of here!" he screamed at Tae-young, who materialized from nowhere to pull Ashanti to her feet and half-carry her to another vehicle. "You violated challenge rules," Ashanti managed through her daze. "That was real gunfire. That's going to cost." "I don't care." Lee climbed into the vehicle beside her, his face harder than she'd ever seen it. Sun-Hee crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. The challenge is forfeit. I'm accepting the consequences. You've done enough. Ashanti wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could finish what she started, but her body was shutting down, adrenaline fully depleted, injuries catching up, exhaustion overwhelming her determination. She'd given everything she had and come up one rescue short. Sometimes survival means knowing when you've reached your limit, her grandmother's voice whispered. Sometimes the bravest thing is accepting help instead of dying alone. Okay, Ashanti heard herself say. Get Keisha through negotiation, but Lee, when we get her back safely, I'm done. No more challenges, no more competitions, no more being your legendary warrior. I go back to being invisible, and you let me. Lee was quiet for a long moment. If that's what you choose, I'll honor it. You've earned that right 10 times over. They drove toward headquarters in silence, both understanding that the competition had ended in ways neither had anticipated, and whatever came next would reshape everything about their alliance and Ashanti's place in a world she'd never asked to enter. 5 rescued, 1 still in danger, a challenge forfeited with consequences nobody can predict. Comment below, was Lee right to end the challenge, or should Ashanti have pushed for that final rescue? Your opinion matters because this story isn't over yet. 3 days after the forfeit, Ashanti sat in the same conference room where this had all started, waiting for Sun Hee to arrive for their final negotiation. Lee had worked around the clock to secure Keisha's release through channels that didn't involve continuing the competition. Favors called, territories offered, concessions made that probably cost him significantly more than just losing the challenge would have. But Keisha was home safely as of that morning, released unharmed with apologies from the Bayek family and assurances that she'd never be targeted again. The same went for all 6 civilians. Sun Hee had agreed to permanent immunity for them as part of the negotiated settlement. The cost had been steep. Lee ceded 40% of his Chicago territories to the Bayek family, accepted junior partnership status in several previously neutral operations, and essentially acknowledged that the Hyundai network no longer held dominant position in the city's Korean underworld. He'd lost, because Ashanti couldn't finish the gauntlet, because he'd chosen her safety over his empire. Sun Hee entered at exactly 2 p.m., dressed impeccably as always, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd won completely. She sat across from Ashanti and Lee, studied them both, and smiled. I won't pretend to be disappointed, she said. The territories I've acquired are worth significantly more than proving some philosophical point about legends being mortal. So, thank you, Mr. Lee, for your pragmatism. You crossed lines, Lee replied coldly. Kidnapping civilians, using innocent people as leverage, that was unconscionable even by our world's standards. I played within the rules you agreed to. The contract specified strategic gauntlet, and I interpreted that broadly. Sun Hee's smile didn't waver. If you didn't want civilians involved, you should have specified that in the contract. That's on you, not me. The contract also specified 3 challenges to determine territorial control. We only completed 1.5. By strict interpretation, the competition remains unfinished. You forfeited. That's completion through surrender. Sun Hee pulled out her tablet, showing the signed agreement. Unless you're suggesting we resume the competition, I'd be happy to arrange a 3rd challenge, though I suspect Miss Davis here isn't interested in more opportunities to prove her mortality. Ashanti spoke for the first time since Sun Hee arrived. I'm done. Whatever 3rd challenge you had planned, I'm not participating. Lee agreed to your terms. You've won. Take your territories and leave the civilians alone like you promised. Of course, I always keep my word. Sun Hee looked genuinely pleased. But I do have one question, Miss Davis. When you were in that restaurant, surrounded by my teams, knowing you couldn't win, how did it feel? Realizing that legends are just people who haven't failed publicly yet. It felt like being human, which I've always been, regardless of viral videos or formal challenges. Ashanti met Sun Hee's gaze without flinching. You wanted to prove legends are mortal. Congratulations, you proved it. I couldn't save everyone, couldn't win every fight, couldn't be superhuman despite people expecting it. Does that make you feel powerful? Vindicated, more than powerful. Sun Hee stood, preparing to leave. You inspired thousands of women to believe they could fight back, could overcome impossible odds. That was dangerous to the systems that keep organizations like mine functioning. So, yes, demonstrating that even you have limits serves a purpose. People will remember that the hairpin warrior couldn't complete the gauntlet, that fighting back has costs, that sometimes surrender is the only logical choice. She left, taking her victory and her vindication, leaving Ashanti and Lee alone in the conference room with the wreckage of their alliance and the weight of choices that had led here. "I'm sorry," Lee said quietly. "This is my fault. I brought you into this world, put you in Sun Hee's crosshairs, created the circumstances that nearly got you killed. Stop apologizing. I made my own choices." Ashanti stood, feeling every injury from the past week. "But I meant what I said. I'm done. No more legendary warrior, no more competitions, no more being a symbol for anything except maybe what happens when ordinary people get thrust into extraordinary situations and survive imperfectly." "What will you do? Go back to being invisible? Find another restaurant job, probably. Pay my rent, visit Mrs. Chen and make sure she's recovering okay. Spend time with Keisha and remember what friendship looks like outside crisis situations." Ashanti headed for the door. "Live a normal life, basically. The life I had before 30 assassins walked into Constellation. That's not possible anymore. You're too visible, too well known. The video has been seen by millions now, both the original and the competition footage Sun Hee live-streamed. You can't become invisible when the whole world knows your face." Ashanti paused at the door, knowing he was right but refusing to accept it. "Then I'll move. New city, new name, new life. People have done it before. And leave everything? Everyone? Your grandmother's grave? The communities you've built connections with? The people who see you as inspiration despite Sun Hee's vindication? If that's what it takes to stop being a symbol and start being a person again, yes." She turned back to face him. "Lee, I appreciate everything you did. Protecting me, giving me resources, ending the challenge to save my life. But this world you operate in, where people kidnap innocents and film legends dying to prove philosophical points, I can't live here. I won't. So thank you for the opportunity, and I mean that genuinely, but we're done." She left before he could respond, walked out of the headquarters she'd never expected to enter, and headed toward the Bronzeville apartment that was probably compromised, but was still the closest thing she had to home. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it 3 days ago, shabby, small, hers. Ashanti collapsed onto her thrift store couch and allowed herself to cry for the first time since this nightmare started. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears for everything she'd lost and everything she'd discovered about herself that she wished she didn't know. Her phone buzzed. Text from Keisha. "Home safe, completely unharmed like you promised. Thank you doesn't cover it, but thank you. When you're ready, come visit. I think we need to talk about everything." Another text, this time from an unknown number. "Miss Davis, this is David Park. My father wanted me to tell you that you honored your promise. You didn't abandon us. Our family is in your debt. If you ever need anything, call this number." And a third text from Lee. "I understand your decision. Your final payment has been transferred. 6 months of salary at cultural liaison rates, plus bonus for exceptional service. It's not enough to compensate for what you've endured, but it's what I can offer. The apartment security stays active as long as you're there. Consider it severance. You earned it 10 times over." Ashanti checked her bank account and nearly dropped her phone. The transfer was substantial, $180,000 total, enough to relocate anywhere in the country and survive for years while building a new life. Generous to the point of uncomfortable, but she wouldn't refuse it. That money bought freedom, possibility, escape from the world that had tried to consume her. She spent the next 2 weeks healing physically and planning her next move. Mrs. Chen recovered fully, though the trauma of kidnapping left emotional scars that would take longer to fade. Keisha visited 3 times, and they talked for hours about everything that had happened, about friendship surviving chaos, about how Ashanti had become someone Keisha barely recognized but still loved fiercely. The viral videos continued spreading, both the original hairpin warrior footage and the competition clips Sun Hee live-streamed. Ashanti watched her legend grow in real time while sitting in her shabby apartment, eating takeout and planning her escape to Portland or Seattle or anywhere that wasn't Chicago. 2 weeks became 3. 3 became 4, and Ashanti found herself unable to leave, unable to abandon the city where everything had happened, unable to become invisible when people kept recognizing her and thanking her for inspiring them to be stronger. She was famous now in ways that felt surreal and uncomfortable. Social media accounts dedicated to her fighting techniques, self-defense classes using her name and methods, women approaching her on the street to share stories about how watching her videos had given them courage to leave abusive relationships, stand up to harassers, believe they could be more than victims. Sun Hee had wanted to prove that legends were mortal, that fighting back had limits, but somehow Ashanti's very public failure to complete the gauntlet had become its own inspiration, proof that you didn't have to be perfect to be strong, that coming up short while trying your hardest still mattered, that legends were most powerful when they showed their humanity. It was 6 weeks after the competition when Ashanti made her decision. She'd been sitting in her apartment, staring at bank transfers and apartment listings in distant cities, when her phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. "Ms. Davis?" Female voice, young, nervous. "My name is Angela Martinez. I saw your videos, and I need help. My ex-boyfriend has been stalking me for 3 months. Police say they can't do anything until he actually hurts me, and I remembered watching you fight, and I thought, maybe you could teach me how to not be helpless." Ashanti's first instinct was to say no, to explain that she wasn't a teacher, that she was trying to retire from being a symbol. But something in Angela's voice, the desperation mixed with hope, reminded her of herself before that night at Constellation, before she discovered that ordinary people could become extraordinary when circumstances demanded it. "Where are you located?" Ashanti heard herself ask. "South Side, near Hyde Park. There's a community center on 53rd Street. Meet me there tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring comfortable clothes you can move in." Ashanti surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. "I can't promise to make you fearless, but I can teach you what my grandmother taught me, how to survive." She hung up and sat in the silence of her apartment, realizing what she'd just committed to. Not invisibility, not escape, but something else. Using what she'd learned, what she'd survived, to help others survive their own impossible situations. Over the next 3 months, Ashanti built something she never expected, a legitimate self-defense program for women who'd been failed by systems that should have protected them. She used Lee's severance payment to rent the community center space, hired 2 other instructors who'd been trained in various martial arts, and structured classes around not just physical technique, but the mental resilience her grandmother had instilled. The program grew faster than anticipated. Women came from across Chicago, some who'd seen the videos, others who'd heard through word of mouth about the legendary hairpin warrior teaching practical survival skills. Ashanti taught them what her grandmother had taught her, that weapons were less important than mindset, that size mattered less than determination, that surviving meant refusing to quit even when quitting looked logical. She saw Lee occasionally, usually when he visited to check on her program or offer resources she sometimes accepted and sometimes refused. Their relationship had shifted into something like mutual respect. He'd lost his territories but maintained his operations. She'd lost her anonymity but gained purpose. Neither had gotten what they expected, but both had survived. Soon he never contacted her directly, but Ashanti heard through Lee that the Bay family leader watched the self-defense program's growth with something between amusement and concern. Her attempt to prove legends mortal had backfired spectacularly. Ashanti's very public struggle and imperfect success had made her more relatable, more inspiring, more dangerous to organizations that relied on people feeling powerless. It was 4 months after the competition when Ashanti received an envelope with no return address, delivered to the community center. Inside was a single piece of paper with a message in elegant handwriting. Ms. Davis, you were right. Destroying the hairpin made a better story than I intended. You're proving that legends aren't made of symbols, but of choices. That's more dangerous than any viral video. Well played. S.H. Ashanti smiled beside herself, tucked the note into her pocket, and returned to teaching a class of 15 women how to break holds and strike vulnerable points and believe they could survive whatever came next. 6 months after everything fell apart, Ashanti Davis stood in front of her largest class yet. 40 women crowded into the community center, ranging from teenagers to grandmothers, all there to learn from the legendary warrior who'd failed publicly and kept going anyway. I'm not a superhero, she told them honestly. I'm not invincible. 6 months ago, I couldn't save everyone I cared about, couldn't complete a challenge that was designed to break me, couldn't be the perfect symbol people wanted. She looked across the faces watching her with hope and determination. But I survived, and I kept going, and I used what I learned to help others survive. That's the real lesson. Not that you have to win every fight, that you have to keep choosing to stand up, even after you've been knocked down. The class erupted in applause, and Ashanti felt something shift inside her. Not pride exactly, but acceptance. She'd never wanted to be a legend, but if being a very human, very flawed legend meant helping others discover their own strength, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. That night, alone in her apartment, still shabby, still small, still hers, Ashanti pulled out the box she'd kept hidden since her grandmother's death. Letters and photographs and small mementos from a woman who'd lived multiple lives and died with most of her secrets intact. At the bottom, underneath everything else, Ashanti found what she'd been searching for without knowing it, a letter addressed to her in her grandmother's handwriting, dated 5 years before dementia had started stealing her memories. My beautiful granddaughter, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've discovered the skills I taught you weren't just games. I'm sorry for that burden. Sorry you inherited a legacy of survival I never wanted to explain. I came to America in 1969 to escape a life I couldn't continue. I'd been trained for violence, used for purposes I disagreed with, turned into a weapon by people who saw me as expendable. So I disappeared, became someone ordinary, became invisible. But I never forgot how to fight, and I never stopped believing that sometimes ordinary people need extraordinary skills just to survive in a world that doesn't protect them. I taught you those skills hoping you'd never need them, but also knowing that Davis women have a way of ending up in situations where fighting back becomes necessary. Whatever path brought you to this letter, whatever circumstances forced you to use what I taught you, I'm proud of you. Not for being perfect, not for winning every battle, but for choosing to fight when fighting mattered, for protecting others when you could have protected only yourself. That's what makes a legend, baby girl. Not viral videos or formal competitions or symbols that can be destroyed, but choices made in moments when giving up would be easier. You're stronger than you know, more capable than you believe, and more human than any legend should have to be. I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'll always be with you. In every technique I taught, every lesson I shared, every moment you choose to stand when staying down would be simpler. Keep surviving. Keep choosing. Keep being exactly who you are. Your grandmother, Elizabeth Davis. Ashanti read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face, and felt something break open inside her. Not pain, but release. Permission to be imperfect, permission to fail, permission to be a legend who was also just a woman trying her best in impossible circumstances. She folded the letter carefully, placed it on her nightstand next to where her grandmother's hairpin used to rest, and allowed herself to imagine what came next. More classes, more women learning to survive, maybe expanding the program to other cities, maybe writing about her experiences, maybe just living day to day, making small differences in individual lives instead of trying to be a symbol for millions. The viral videos would keep spreading, the legend would keep growing. Sun He would keep running her criminal empire, Lee would keep rebuilding his territories, and somewhere in Chicago, 40 women would go home tonight carrying skills that might save their lives, inspired by a legend who'd showed them that surviving imperfectly was better than dying perfectly. That was Ashanti Davis's legacy. Not the hairpin, not the impossible victories, but the choice to keep standing and help others stand with her. It wasn't what she'd planned 6 months ago when she'd walked into Constellation's private dining room with a water pitcher and sore feet, but it was enough. It was everything. And tomorrow she'd wake up and choose to keep going, because that's what Davis women did. They survived. And sometimes survival looked like building something new from the pieces of a legend that never fit quite right in the first place. The end. If you made it this far, you understand what this story was really about. Not invincibility, but resilience. Not perfection, but persistence. Drop a comment sharing one time you kept going even when quitting looked easier. Your story matters. And subscribe to Love and Tension for more stories about ordinary people discovering extraordinary strength in impossible moments. Because legends aren't born, they're made through choices we all can make.